even though I wasn't like it was I was within these restrictions. I knew, and I for the longest time kept on thinking about, oh, it's keeping me away from something. Rather, those limitations actually helped me build something more that I wouldn't have built otherwise.
I think that limitations are something that they're almost a requirement for creativity. When we learn something about ourselves and what we want, we need to have the flexibility to change those goals and make sure that they're in alignment with our values. The kind of calibration that you have to do as an artist to turn up and down the like critical thinking is very, very delicate. Imposter syndrome, it's not about like how do I get rid of it, but rather how do I live with this, acknowledge this, and not let it impact what I do in a way that is destructive.
Welcome to the podcast, Patty. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. This took a little bit of coordination, but I'm so glad that we met finally. I've seen you on Instagram. Your reels have been all over, and it's very exciting to see you and see this iconic. I see those reels have the same background as what I can see you right now.
Yes, the bookshelf is constantly here.
Yes, it's become your brand today, I think.
It's funny because there are some people. So there are a lot of people who will see the books on the reels, but also inside the membership. Whenever I give a talk or we're doing a group coaching call, they'll see that and they'll wonder what those books are. Um, and originally, they weren't even art books. They were just my husband. I was storing books for him, and now they're my books, but they're not really carefully curated. They're simply what galleries have sent me and what artists have sent me. So it's really one of the things that you can kind of tell is how much money is behind some of the books, because the larger the book, usually the larger the organization or company that put the book together.
Yeah. And when I was looking, I have a love affair with books for sure. It's something not only buying but making books, publishing books. But also when I was also looking at the same way, like, what these books are. And I really thought, because on Instagram it's like a quick bite, you can't really make it out. But I always thought these were your art books. And I was like, you know what? This looks like a really impressive collection.
Well, thank you. Yeah, they definitely are art books now. So there's a story behind a fair number of them, but it's maybe not as interesting as one would think.
Okay, let's start with how and why where you are, like, how you got here. What brought you to the arts? I know you worked a long time in the industry, and there's a lot of things that you do. You run the network, you work with galleries, curators, artists. But let's hold on for that a bit and just start from where you started.
I always liked art. I guess that's the start of it. Like, and I have certain days that I remember, like I was always very good at drawing. And when I was a child, I remember waking up one night, like in the middle of the night, and I don't know, I was maybe 5, and I was like, "Oh, I know how to draw an apple now." So I got up out of bed and drew the apple, and my father came into the bedroom and was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, dad, I just realized I knew how to draw an apple." And I have like a number of those eh, tiny stories where I just realized I could do something, and then it was like the most exciting thing to be able to translate what something looked like onto a piece of paper. So I was always very, very good at that. And my thought was just that I should do the thing that I liked a lot and was the best at. And that was kind of it, honestly. So I knew I was really good at drawing and I knew I really liked it. And whenever I did it, it was like I just disappear into a hole and like not come out for several hours. And I even have I actually reproduced a mixtape that I had from high school that I now play when I run because I actually the mixtape from high school was something that I used to play all of the time when I was drawing. And so I kind of miss that time. So
Do you draw
so I
anymore?
play it. Not that much. I think there's like 1 or 2 times that I've produced a reel, and I was like, "Oh, I think I need to draw something for this."
So what brought you to the other side then? I think this is very interesting. For me, I always ask people this question if because I think for me, I didn't ever expected myself to come on the other side of the arts. I always thought myself as an artist. But then I also came from business. I knew business. And I always had this entrepreneurial spirit that brought me here as well. But I'm always interested in asking people, like people who are on the flip side of being an artist, have they ever thought about being in the arts? Because that's the first thought when we think about being creative. It's about being making something. And then people who are artists, do they think like they want to, can they go to the other side? What brought you there?
Well, for one thing, I went to art school. I have my BFA and my MFA, and I did quite well there. But one of the issues that I had was I didn't actually have a lot of creative ideas for art making. So I wasn't great at material experimentation, which I think is a fairly large and important thing within the contemporary arts. And I didn't have a lot of ideas beyond reproducing things. And after a while, that became pretty frustrating to me. Like my brain just didn't work that way. So when I started the blog, it was I was in the middle of a kind of creative funk. I didn't have a lot of ideas, and then suddenly with writing about my own opinions, of which everybody has a lot of though, but like I was like, well, I'm not going to run out of these. And so that's when things started to shift for me. And that's how I got out of, you know, here I am in this like art making track to now I'm going to be writing about it because that was something where I felt like I had more ideas and more creativity was flowing. And I think the thing about that was that I didn't I didn't wanna just write about anything. I didn't have opinions about just anything. I was really, really and continue to be to this day. It's been like 20 years. I'm not tired of art. I love the people. The people are the best part about art in some ways. Like they're so interesting. The minute any artist has an idea, like a creative idea that you wouldn't have thought of, there's like it's like I get a burst of energy from it, and it's so exciting, and that's why I do this, because being around artists and ideas that you wouldn't have, there's nothing more energizing, and I wanna see more of that in the world.
Yeah. But tell me something that I really want to ask honestly. Did you have any kind of imposter while I'm just trying to imagine you early years, trying to navigate yourself as an artist, and then finding yourself writing about art. Now, how the traditional art system works. I'm very grateful, I think, for all of us, how um, it's opening up. A lot of barriers have been already broken, and there are new systems, there are new things. It's every day. It's the whole wheel is reinventing. But I'm sure by the time that you were, it wasn't as much as that, right? So you from being an artist, where I'm typically thinking about, someone in the early years. A lot of us do not build that confidence that we eventually build over the years. We understand, okay, how creativity works, how you don't have to have like a certificate, a degree, accreditation, all of those things, that really a lot of times in the beginning we run after. But did you deal with any kind of imposter in the beginning, thinking, okay, also having like this also having this grudge towards the industry? Sometimes I feel like a lot of artists have made great careers in flip fields when they felt like they were very irritated, and they felt like, I really need to, like, I'll do something about it, and then they find themselves in that loop. Do you think you had any of those experiences?
Oh, terribly, terribly. So I did some creative writing in grad school as well, and that was always what people thought I should be doing. And I didn't continue to do a lot of it because I didn't have a lot of ideas for creative writing. And within the field of art, I felt like as a maker, I felt incredible imposter syndrome because I knew one of the things that can happen is once you become familiar with all of the sort of gestures and language within contemporary art, you can become too self conscious to make them and execute them. And that's something that happened to me. So I dealt with that. And then when I switched to writing, one of the reasons it took me so long to do that was I sort of felt, well, like, I haven't been trained in writing. What business do I have? And you see that a lot with artists who maybe are self-trained or don't have an MFA. They feel the same way. And so I felt that very strongly with writing. I had to teach myself. I was up till 4 a.m. sometimes writing a single paragraph because I didn't know how to do it. I had an ear for it. I knew that. And, I was bad enough that I had asked my mother, like, down the road whether she knew I'd be any good, and she was like, "No, I had no idea that you'd be good at writing." Right? And so and I also think that because of the way that social media is kind of built, it's it almost sets you up for comparison. So nobody I think if you're ambitious in any way, you are you are going to feel imposter syndrome. And so it's not about like I think imposter syndrome it's not about like how do I get rid of it, but rather how do I live with this, acknowledge this and not let it impact what I do in a way that is destructive. And I feel like, because it can be very instructive. It lets you know what you want, right? And what you want is important.
Yeah. And you know what? In my own personal, I think this was something in the last episode also we discussed, which was, I feel like whenever there's an imposter syndrome, like, for my own experience so far, I have shifted several identities, like professionally, but also I think for someone like being in creative work, a lot of times our professional identities are definitely an extension of who we are. Like if I want to get into the mode of a writer, you set the stage, you put that, you have to like really, you know live those days, like, sit on the table. So it's a lot of it's a very spiritual and a professional aspect both to it. But I also feel like when we're always having these transitions and changes, it's also letting, like, this imposter syndrome is always teaching us to let it go of these limiting beliefs that we've been taught with, grown with, taught ourselves with. Like, a lot of very common artists that have is, I didn't come from an art degree, I don't have this, so I don't have that. That becomes a block in the early years, and when you keep going forward and you look back and like, you know what, it didn't even matter. What mattered is how skilled I get. Like, it's the moment you start working on it, you understand that you're just you're letting go of those limiting beliefs so that you can get rid of that imposter.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is important to acknowledge in all of this is that, and I think maybe this is, I guess I would say, slightly adjacent to imposter syndrome, but one of the reasons that we struggle so much in general is that the problems we have are very real. Imposter syndrome comes it doesn't come out of nowhere. We are dealing with and I think within the arts, we deal with a lot of very, very tough issues. There is not enough money around. Um, there's not enough money around. There is I think it's very difficult to make a career. It is a very competitive field. And I think part of being an independent artist means being having the ability to be self-critical. And so the kind of calibration that you have to do as an artist to turn up and down the like critical thinking is very, very delicate, and you're not always going to get it right. So sometimes, I think, especially when we're younger, I think the limiting beliefs can really get in our way. One of the things that I like about being a little bit older, and I'm close to 50. I'm one of the I'm probably one of the few people. I can hardly wait to get to 50. I'm so excited. I'm going to have a big party. Um but
Wouldn't that
like,
be exciting?
oh yeah. That's it's 2 years from now, but I'm just letting everybody know now that the year of the 50s, you're never going to stop hearing from me. But but one of the nice things about being a little bit older is that you have worked through some of these limiting beliefs. One of the big, big limiting beliefs that I had was that I was terrible at math and that I would never be able to run a business, or nor would I want to, and that this shortcoming was going to keep me from ever being successful.
Yeah, I am in that club with you. I had that for a very long time. And I started business very early. So thank God I worked through all those years to come till this point where I figured, like, you know what? It doesn't matter.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? Like, as long as you can kind of read a balance sheet, you're fine. Like, am I making money or did I lose money? Okay, the goal is not to lose money. Like,
Yeah, and I think, you know what? I figured this when I work with people in business who are not, creative in the sense of the arts. I think we all are creative in our own ways, in our own languages we speak, the maths we do, the logics we put in. But what I figured is, you know how art also feels very mystical, and there's this, like, um people feel overwhelmed, and they feel like, scared of judgment on, if they do not come from that industry, feeling judged. Okay, I do not know how this works. I don't know how to look at art. I don't know how. Because also I think, like, for a very long time, I think we keep telling each other, like, this is how something needs to happen. This is right, this is not right, whatever, whoever does this, whatever people come together, I really don't know. But similarly, I think with maths and running a business, I always thought, that running a business meant day to day, like, there was a lot of maths, and like I had to do it those ways where I saw things around me. And a lot of things in the beginning, I started and I failed, and then I again started, and then I again failed and started and failed. And then I figured, like, what, I'm just going to do it my way. I don't care. I'm not running a business. I kept on telling myself, I'm not running a business. I don't care about it. And I started to make it a way that was natural to me. I could understand, and it was very simple for me. Plus and minus, like you said, as long as I have, as long as you're making money, as long as you're on the positive, your PNL is straight. And I never thought myself using words MIS and like all of that, but now I get it today, and it's only because I didn't let anybody confuse me. I just got what I got, and I did what I could with it. So I think it goes both ways, like how people confuse people with arts, and how creative people feel scared with business and like maths and marketing and all of that, because there's so much mystery and like these fancy words and things that you need to do. And I think that's also one of the biggest blocks for artists, and I think in today's time. So we do daily MIS for all our publishing shipments, for our daily revenues, for our order basis. Like, you concise your information, and you have an update of where everything is, what the numbers look like. It's a very simple. It's I always was like, so my partner is a businessman, and I come from a business family, so I've heard this word for so long, and I was always like, there's an MIS meeting, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it was so scary. And when I got into business, I figured, okay, you know what? I need an update every day on what's happening, how many shipments are going, how many books are going, how many are coming in. And I figured, okay, you know what? I need a daily MIS. And I need a daily MIS for the money we are spending, the money we are getting. And it became as simple as that. And today I am not overwhelmed with it. And it only sounded fancier when it was done by other people. To me, it's as basic as just putting things together and telling me, okay, this is what it is, this is what it is.
I mean, I think the other thing too with managing a business is that you will find that you are inherently interested in things that you thought you would never have any interest in whatsoever. Like when I hear that, just to be honest, it sounds boring to me. But if it were my business and I look at numbers all day, which I never thought I would ever do, it doesn't bother me. And it doesn't bother me because they are tied to things that are interesting to me. So when numbers are telling a narrative that's connect to something you care about, then it's different. And the other thing that I did that really helped me, and I did this it didn't I didn't do it early enough, but I did do it eventually, was that I hired a bookkeeper. This was 2013, and I had almost no money. Actually, it was earlier than 2013. I think it was 2010. I had almost no money, but I hired a bookkeeper because I wasn't keeping my books, and I just knew I would never do it if I didn't have help. So even though I didn't have that much money, I hired somebody, I got them to do the books. And after that, I was like, I'm never going back. I'm like, I can have somebody do some of these things that know I don't like to do. And I think that I don't know if that's true of being an entrepreneur, but I think it might be like one of the things that is uh, maybe a core personality trait I would say about myself is that I cannot force myself to do something I am not interested in. It's just not in my personality. And the nice thing about a business is that it's built around
Your
finding
own interest.
people, yeah, your own interests and finding people who are good at the things that they're good at, and so there's something about that that I think is really very empowering and like it honestly just fills me with joy to work with really talented people every day. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah. No, I love that point, because I think, um, even though we do not like things, and I think this is another problem for, like, when we talk about creative people, I think in today's world, it's a fact that if you're an independent artist, and I think the traditional term of being independent has also changed so much. It does not matter. I think if you're creating content, if whatever you're doing, you even if you have a gallery representation, even if you're working with dealers, even if you're working with whoever you're working with, you're still an independent business. Today artists have become more than just selling work. They've become independent brands. There's Instagram, there are brand deals, like there's so much more that has now that goes into the business and behind the scenes, that you always will need multiple partners, multiple players to help you scale yourself. And I think what really needs to, I think why this conversation also need to be demystified is because a lot of times we feel scared of certain words, like, like I said, I always was scared of finance. I was scared of, um, investments, and like these really terms that didn't ever, I was always the one who would drop out of maths. I never, I even today I can't, but I have the resources, I have a team who can help me navigate that part of, that I am not good at. And thinking like like a creative entrepreneur, thinking like, okay, um even if I'm selling my work independently, or if I'm selling through a gallery, am I making profits enough? Can I keep going? How do I increase my profits? Or how do I, like these questions, like I think, do you feel like artists today look at themselves like that? Are we ready enough for it?
Look at themselves like what?
Like creative entrepreneurs, like entrepreneurs.
No. I think that's I I think it depends on the artist, of course, right? And I think with a lot of the artists that I work with, the term is almost a bad word. Like being an entrepreneur might prevent you from having creative thoughts rather than what I think the reality is, which is that if you think of yourself as running a small business and you treat it that way, you will free up more time to be creative, right? Because a lot of the work is figuring out how to structure your business so that you can build in creative, like, so that you can maximize the amount of creative time that you have in the studio. And if it's lopsided in any way, you're going to end up with less time in the studio than you want. So I think a lot of the work that I do is on if I'm being honest, it's some of the work is sometimes annoying for artists. I don't know of any artist who's like, my favorite thing is writing an artist statement. I can hardly wait to dive right in. Most of the artists like hate it. But when they have it, it saves them a lot of time.
You know what, in this situation you just said something that I think always sticks like just stuck to me. It's like, we even, even if you're running a business, even if you're running an art business, artist business, whatever, there are things that we absolutely will hate, like, nobody likes to write an artist statement, very few people, or nobody likes to do finance, or market or admin work, or all of those things. But once it's been tied to a bigger purpose, like I know, if I write an artist statement, it's going to help me navigate my creative thoughts, or have more structured, of what am I thinking, what am I working on, or may get my work more noticed, or send in more emails. Like, then I know that what I'm doing, even if I, because you know what, I feel like the hard part of the reality is that we will not always like what we do. There will be parts that we will absolutely love, but there will always be parts that we may not as much. But as long as we have that bigger purpose aligned to it, that writing a good artist statement or sharing my thoughts and putting my thoughts on paper will help me navigate the creative side of my work, I think that becomes a stronger purpose. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I love that. I mean, I I love that you tied that to the larger purpose, and that larger purpose actually giving you more flexibility and creativity, right? Because if you have a large goal, and let's say it's the large goal, if we're to think about it spatially, is up high, right? Like there are a lot of different ways to get to that goal. And the more ways that we have to get to a goal, if we encounter an obstacle, we have more flexibility to move around it, right? So I think that that's really key. And the other thing that I think is sort of related to that, um I feel like there's a flow chart somewhere that somebody's got to make for this. But I think it made me think of some reel I made probably a year and a half ago about the cliche of thinking outside of the box. And one of the things that I think people don't think about enough actually is that everybody has to work within certain confines, you know, and so the challenge isn't really how do you think outside of the box, but how do you work within the constraints that you have. And that's where I think understanding the constraints that you have, yet having that larger goal is fear and purpose is very important because it allows you to stay focused and acknowledge your limitations at the same time.
I love that. You know what brought me here, like when while you're on it, I was looking at someone, speaking to someone, and we were talking about like they're doing like a. So this is another arts organization. They're working with artists and they're helping artists speed up, like work in different situations and all of that. And so we were just talking about how um speed, making like making artists work under pressure, because there's a certain way we all work, and it's a good skill set for all of us to have, like work to be able to work in different situations. And I was like, you know what, I never thought this way. In the past couple of years my life is so haywire, and I feel like I'm always juggling like multiple projects, work, and here and there. So I've always thought, like it takes me away from like a dedicated, like I'd love to have that day, every alternate day or every day, to be in the studio, be myself, and just do the work. And but on the contrary, I knew I needed to keep going, so I would find little pockets of time, and I'd, whenever I have 2 hours to blocked in the day, and I would mm, do quicker works. Now that also made me realize, like even though I wasn't like it was I was within these restrictions, I knew I still wanted to, I had this will to keep making the work. And I developed this habit of making faster work or making faster drawings, and it became a skill set that today is helping me building another thing. And I, for the longest time, kept on thinking about, oh, it's keeping me away from something. Rather, those limitations actually help me build something more that I wouldn't have built otherwise.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I think that limitations are something that they're almost a requirement for creativity, right? So I kind of love thinking about them, especially I think I'm somebody who's spent a lot of time working with technology, and I feel like technology in a lot of ways is about dealing with limitations and then finding ways around those limitations. So there's a lot of, I think there's also just one of the um, one of the jobs of the artist and for anybody really is to just find the place where you can be creative because there's a lot of different mediums and ways where creativity shows itself. And I think if we go back to the concept of imposter syndrome, I said I had a lot of imposter syndrome around uh like around math, but I also, this is just one of those things like that I think maybe just doesn't go away. But like every time I have to do a reel, pretty much every time I'm like, okay, this is going to be the last idea I have.
And look, I remember you. That's how I got to know about you. That's how I remember you. When I think about your name, that's my first image of you.
Yeah. So, I, I think, you always have to kind of push past that stuff.
Yeah. And what's, I think, even in this, as I think technology has made a lot of things easier, but also a lot of things confusing for a lot of us. I think with the pro and the con both. I think when with technology, a lot of doors in open where people are um, exposed to a different opinion, a lot of different opinions. um, the negative side of that has also become that there are too many opinions, and a lot of times I feel like we, no matter wherever we are transitioning, and I feel like no matter what stage of career we are all, we're always transitioning from one step to another, always learning more. And specifically while you are in those areas of transition where you're still experimenting, figuring out your foot, I think with more information there's a lot of confusion. Okay, this is how I'm supposed to be, this is how I'm supposed to be, or this is how I'm supposed to be. There's so much of information overload that sometimes we have to go within and understand that, okay, as creative people, there's the first rule is there's no rule. I think I at least always comply by that.
I mean, I think there's a real issue with the amount of information that's out there because, uh, and also the amount of communications training that I think is really required to navigate it effectively. Before I did the work that I do in the membership, I taught a research class to students at Parsons University, and one of the things that I did with them was I tried to teach them how to follow links. This is just sort of basic stuff. Do research, fact check. So I would give them an article I knew was filled with faulty information, and have them figure out how to determine the like the veracity of the information that was being shared. But especially, it's one thing to do that with articles. I think on Instagram, there are a lot of just sort of narratives over images with no citations. You don't know where anything comes from. And so it's very easy to get confused because there's no sourcing for anything. And that's only going to get worse with AI that doesn't source anything, steals materials from artists. And I think there are a lot of really thorny issues that we are going to be navigating in the upcoming years that have to do with authorship. And I do think that that's one of the reasons that, like, the amount of information that's out there and the quality of the information, I think, is one of the reasons that we are seeing a little bit of stepping back from online life. One of the things that I've noticed with myself personally is that it has really affected how much I remember. Um, and I mean, I never had a great memory, but it's certainly compromised now. Like, if you spend a lot of time consuming information and you're always on a scroll.
Yeah, we're constantly distracted.
Yeah, there's and that what happens is I actually saw a doctor about it at one point, and she was like, "Well, the brain just gets overloaded. And when that happens, then you can't remember things." But she also said something that was kind of useful to me. She was like, when you have cognitive issues, one of the things that we look for it as a signifier is, like, if you're mistaking your toaster for an air conditioner, we consider that a problem. If you're just forgetting things, that's not necessarily evidence of some deeper issue. So that actually made me feel a little bit good because I was like, I'm definitely not mistaking my toaster for an air conditioner.
Absolutely not. I think it completely makes sense. Okay, tell me something. Another thing I want to ask you, for everyone who's listening, this is also not only for the goal for me with the podcast is to help people, when we look at someone else and we figure like, how I want to do what you do, she does, me, whatever. So that we can help them not make the mistakes that we did, also make the path shorter. A lot of times curators, artists find themselves confused, I think, in two sense. A, how to get published. how to get their work in places that they would really want. Have media talk about them, have the other side is how do they become a part of these, like you've had this career where you write for some incredible publishers and outlets. How did you navigate this, since you also did not come, let's also reestablish the fact that you didn't come from an art degree, like the curation or the writing side of it, and how did you navigate that side, and today you're playing these multiple roles, and for someone who's looking to get in connection with such people or looking to get their art published, both.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. First of all, I think we've spent a little bit of time talking about goal setting. And I think that's really important, right? Because if you don't set a goal, you're never going to know if you achieved what you wanted, right? And one of the things that I think is maybe a misnomer about goal setting is that it's something that's easy. A lot of times we don't know what we want, right? And also, I think one of the things that is a challenge within the online environment is that it sort of encourages us to dig in our heels with specific positions. But one of the things that I think is really important that we all do in our careers is change our goals when they need changing. When we learn something about ourselves and what we want, we need to have the flexibility to change those goals and make sure that they're in alignment with our values. One of the things that can happen is that when they are not in a when our goals are not in alignment with our values, we can be doing things that feel very empty to us. And that's happened to me. I think it's probably happened to everyone at some point or another. If you've been in this field for a while, you can get on the wrong path.
Yeah,
So that's
it's also because we think what we want is because what we're also told we should be having, versus what we really should be having is, we really, again, it comes back to, like, really knowing who you want to be than what people expect you to be.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's number one. The second thing that I like once you have those goals established, and I think some of this really uh, turns into research, right? Like networking is researching and understanding who your audience is. Like, how am I going to get this goal? Well, the first thing is that you need to tell people about it. But if you're telling the wrong people about it, it doesn't matter, right? So the next step in the process is getting familiar enough with the industry you're in to participate in it. And this is not I think the biggest misconception I had was the idea that I could spend a couple days doing this research or a week or two and that then, you know, I I would just understand this. If you want to understand the industry you're in, it's a lifelong process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the research, this part of the diagram, whatever this diagram looks like, it doesn't really stop. It's very circular. And that's fine, right? If you're on the right track, pursuing your goals, and those goals are in alignment with your values, the research that you do alongside that is going to feel good. And the last part of this like let's call it a triangle, um, is the research, or not the research, the outreach. So like you know you have to tell people about what you're doing, and that was something that when I was making art I never did because I didn't feel like it was good enough, and so I didn't want to share it. And to be honest, it kind of wasn't. Like I was really good at drawing things. Like and I see that I like if I did that, I I'd probably do quite well, but like I would be bored.
Yeah. You know what? Here, I also think there's something I keep, at least I use this ideology for myself also. And I've seen this a little bit with other people also. Uh, the role of the artist versus the role of, let's say, a creative entrepreneur. I think when we think as an artist, we think too personal. When we think as an entrepreneur, we think a much larger picture. Specifically, when you're representing your own self as an artist, I think it's a very personal conversation. Building this resilience that, being open to critics, like everything feels too personal. So, like, even if you're outreaching, you feel like, am I good enough? Versus when if you see yourself as a creative entrepreneur, you pitch your work, you're like, I'm taking my work out there, I'm taking my business out there, I'm taking my sales out there. And I think that also is a very, like, is a spin-off, like, but a lot of artists hold themselves back, and I will include myself also in that at a lot of times, because our work becomes very personal to us. And that person, I would do the same thing for another business, another project I'm working on. If it's not me, I wouldn't have that resistance. But I think as artists, we have that resistance because the whole relationship becomes too personal. And I think I keep teaching myself and I keep teaching people around me, like, how do we make this a little bit more impersonal and put it out there? Like, how would you reach out if you didn't feel like you were doing this for someone else who was good making this artwork? What would you do that?
Yeah, I wonder about that. I'm just like, I mean, I really, I mean, I have my own personal experience to go on, and I, I don't know when I produced in 2015. I produced a calendar that was like it was called Naked Artists as Pandas, um, and it was I had 12 artists who posed naked. We had one slot that was free that I couldn't fill. So like me and my staff posed that way, and then we wore panda masks. And I still love that. And it was actually covered on Comedy Central. Um, so and they hated it. And that was like, it was fine. Will Wheaton was on there, he hated it. But I thought it didn't matter to me because I thought it was amazing. I still love that work. Um, so I
But doesn't
think
that show your own stronger relationship with your work? I think that's something that we as artists are continually, like, as creative people, we're continually working on. Like, I love my work. I think not a lot of people can say that very confidently, because a lot of that validation comes from the external world, the numbers, the sales, the popularity, all of those things. So I think it also shows like a sign of your own maturity, because you came from an experience. You had a lot of ups and downs, and you understand today, like, where your own worth is coming, and that definitely is not always coming from outside. And I think that could also be one of the major reasons why that felt like that.
I mean, I guess I guess my point is that there are some things that I've produced though that I like that are shit. I and I released them. I didn't really like them at the time, and and that's one of those things that happens, particularly on things like Instagram, where I'm posting every day. Like, it's not all going to be good, um, and and when I think about the blog that I ran, Art of City, for many years, there's like I actually had entire years where I was like, this just isn't as good as I would like it to be, and so I think like it's one thing to be kind of self-critical and uh I guess I'm just wondering, I this is sort of a long way to get around to this, but what is the benefit of depersonalizing the work that you do, because I hear what you're saying, that if you can make it, if you can create a distance between what you're doing and what you're putting out there, then maybe you'll actually put it out there. But I think in my case, um, I I never depersonalized. I never depersonalized it, but I and the result was sometimes I have stuff out there that I'm terrified that people will remember. It's awful. But I also have some stuff out there that people have forgotten in the same way that they've forgotten the shit that I've done, you know? And so the
I think, from the place that at least I understand this and I have observed and worked for me, um, I feel like I try to practice and I try to recommend depersonalization specifically in areas where I've really not dealt with my own imposter, my own traumas a lot of times. Let's say, my mom passed away 2 years ago, and I was having a really hard time. I was having a terrible time. I didn't make a lot of work. I was throwing myself into, you know, in the business and all of that. And I was, as an artist, I had to undergo this really personal journey of reflecting that anger, that grief, all of that on my work. And I wasn't just ready to put it out there. I just wasn't, because it was too personal. I couldn't take, I knew I wasn't, that work wasn't for me to put out there because it was too personal. It was me navigating my feelings, writing those, and I didn't care about how the outcome would be. I knew that whatever it was, maybe I wasn't really comfortable with putting it out there, and I knew that I didn't have that comfort within me to hear things whatever it would be. Like, it just didn't. And I've seen that wherever there are areas of resistance, no matter that is making the work, sending the work, if I haven't dealt with that internally, that I don't care if people like it or don't like it. I don't care if people understand what I'm feeling. I don't care. As long as I don't reach that point of I don't care, I really do care. I care about those rejections and they become a block for me. I care about how good I am. I care about this isn't good enough. The perfectionist bug takes over. And I think the moment I start finding that ease, and that is when I feel like, okay, I maybe ask a friend for a help. You know what? Can you do this work for me? Can you send this to someone? Because I know if I'm sending it, I will keep judging myself. I don't know if this even makes sense.
Oh, I think it does. I think I mean, in a way it's kind of beautiful.
So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that is, I love being a creative. I think that is all we all share, and a mutual love we all have is because there's no fixed path, there's no one way, there's so many different ways, and how colorful it is. And like, um it's like it's this mysterious way. Even in today's, like, in our magazine's upcoming edition, there's this article I've written, an editorial, which is mystery or magic. And I talk about this. It's like sometimes I feel like this is magical, but it's also so mysterious. Like, we know how sometimes, if I ask you how to find inspiration, you may break that down for me. Like, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? But again, how are these inspirations, how are these thoughts coming to us? Like, it's also very mysterious and magical. So I think I love that about being a creative. Like, we know everything, but we really don't know everything, like anything at all, actually. So it's like this push and pull constantly.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, one last question before I let you go. What is this network? Oh, I love the work that you're going doing. I love how honestly you put your opinion out there, and I feel like we really had a great conversation, even though it didn't feel like we are speaking for the first time. So I really want to know and I want to share with our listeners. What is the network? What do you do? Who is it for? And anything else that you would want to share?
Yeah, so Network is a membership for artists who are mid career, and it's really for artists who want more shows, grants, and residencies. And that's what we help all of these artists do. So the membership is international. Anybody can join. We have a wait list right now because we open quarterly. And it's the way that it's structured. It's one part business network group for artists. So we have a chat channels where people can ask questions, get feedback, list opportunities, that sort of thing, and two weekly newsletters that go out that assemble all of those asks and wins and opportunities. And it's one part professional development. So there's an entire curriculum inside the membership that tells you how to use a marketing term that I think many I'm not, maybe it's not a marketing term, but a business term. Like it tells you how to like optimize your artist statement, your Instagram bio, your CV. And so we help make sure that your materials are really in top form so that when you send them out, you don't have to worry. And I think that's the big thing that and we talked about this. We've been talking about this kind of throughout the show about like what it takes to send something out and put yourself out there. And for me, I always felt like it was way easier to do that when I was confident in the materials that I produced, right? So if I knew that they were good, then the rejections mattered less because I knew that it wasn't about me. And so that's what we help every artist do inside the membership. Optimize everything so that they know when they're sending something off that it's the best it can be. And that if they do get a rejection, it's not about them. So I guess to circle back to the depersonalization, that's kind of how we do it. So maybe I'm back on track with that.
Is it mystery or magic? Who knows? Like, there is logic. I think there's so much logic to everything we do, but there's also no logic. Like, sometimes it's like I love the intuitiveness of the work we do. And again, still trying to find out ways on how things work in a system.
Yeah, me too. So that's what we do with the network membership, and of course, outside of that, I give a lot of free resources away, and I do that via the Instagram, which is workshop.art, and via the podcast that I run, which is Art Problems.
Yes, I love that.
Well, and I also want to thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really been a real pleasure to chat with you. And it's kind of at the beginning, prior to the podcast, you said that it would be a very organic conversation. And that always makes me nervous because I run out of things to say. And it actually was just a pleasure and very organic. So thank you for that.
I think it was a great episode because there's so many great things. I'm going to re-listen to this because I think there's so many good things that I would have to really jot them down in my notebook.
I feel the same way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. I've been following your work and I really look forward to doing more things together. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.
And everyone who's joined us, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And make sure you follow Paddy's work. You can find it on our website. I will link the podcast, the network, and everything else that we've spoken about in this podcast. So make sure you make sure you make the most of these resources. And I hope to see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Bye.